Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters. Tonight was supposed to be the usual show with me, Supermac and John Gibson, but unfortunately, recent events today mean that we've got a slightly different panel. We're still hoping Malcolm can join us, but good evening to John Gibson, to Mitch, and to Steve Hastie on a day which is a sad day for Newcastle United. Certainly a sad day for the fan base. A sad day for PCP and Amanda Staveley, who's put 3 years' work in to try and buy in the football club, but has now found that the goalpost being continually moved by the Premier League means that she hasn't got her wish, and obviously the PIF and the partners have had to pull out. So let's get some reaction from the lads first. John Gibson from the Evening Chronicle, what's your view and what's your take on what's happened today?
Well, an unmitigated disaster for Newcastle United fans. As far as the fans are concerned, and rightly so, they feel that hope is taking a taxi ride out of town. Maybe this is something all the sabre rattlers will be on about, saying that the Premier League have done the right thing because they will carry the can. They didn't say no, but they made it so difficult that the prospective buyers have bailed out. And it is typical NUFC look, isn't it? We have 13 years of trying to get Mike Ashley out of town, and then when we're on the verge of achieving that, the whole thing collapses, and all hope has gone with it. It is a very, very sad day for Newcastle United fans because we've got to start all over again. Even if there isn't a prospective new owner out of there, to be agreed with Ashley, deposits got to go to Ashley, it's got to go in front of the Premier League again. The season's coming up at a rapid rate of knots, a new season, and it's going to be same old, same old. We're going to have our 14th year of battling relegation. Instead of looking upwards, we're going to be looking downwards, as we have been so often during this poisoned reign of Mike Ashley.
Mitch, to you, mate. I suppose over the last couple of weeks, as it's dragged on, we've seen this coming to a degree. We've maintained the positivity. I think it was important amongst the fan base to do that. We haven't misled people. We did believe this was going to go through, but unfortunately, it hasn't. I think time has run out as far as PIF are concerned. And reading the statement, it's a long statement. It's a strong statement by PIF. They feel that they just couldn't continue. Almost felt as if they were misleading the fans because of the way that the Premier League has essentially, dragged this process on. It almost looked to us as if the Premier League were trying to get a delay on this and then hoping the PIF will walk away. Well, now they've got their wish.
I couldn't agree more. They didn't want to make a decision, and it was quite obvious they didn't want to make a decision. Take you back to January, February, when I told a lot of people that I was told that Masters was bricking it. And he obviously was, because he didn't have to, in the end, make the decision. He just had to delay and put as many obstacles as possible in the way, to the point where... But I tell you something, I feel totally hung out to dry. I feel totally hung out to dry by everybody involved in this, not just the Premier League. We're being told, get everybody positive, keep everybody positive, nobody's walking away, everything's going to be all right. And they've just, for the last 2 weeks, we've been asking for something. Give us something to go back at people with. Give us some pushback. Give us something to back it up with. And we've had nout, absolutely nout. And we're the ones who've been hung out to dry here. And in the process, the fan base has been hung out to dry. And it's wrong, absolutely wrong. I feel absolutely led up a garden path and then some. I'm really quite angry. I'm finding it difficult to express who I'm angry at and why, because it's almost like everybody involved in the process.
Yeah,
and the Premier League seem to be so embedded with being in that relationship. That stinks. And I'll tell you something else. People have been breaking NDAs all over the place, except the buyers. The only people who've kept their gob shut through this has been the buyers, and I genuinely wish they hadn't.
Steve Hastie, give us your first reaction. Malcolm's on his way. I've just seen somebody asking it. Malcolm's he struggled to get the link, but he's got it now, so he will be on in the next couple of minutes. Go on, Steve.
Might need Malcolm to ride over the hill and save us. Yeah. You know what? It's reading the statement. Ironically, I think the only people that aren't mentioned in the statement are PIF. You know, we've seen comments for the first time ever. We've seen a comment from young Mr. Rubin, who said, you know, basically repeating what was said by PCP, which is where the statements come from. I understand exactly where Mitch is coming from in terms of being hung out to dry, because as he said, you know, the whole pushback that we've had has been riddled with leak after leak from them, drip feeding information to various people in the media through whatever backdoor route they wanted, while putting up this big front that everything's hiding behind confidentiality. It's a sad day. There's a certain element that feels exactly the same as Mitch, but there's also an element within me that feels, you know what, it's never over till the fat lady sings. And yes, we may have had statements. We may have a situation where we've got PCP and the Rubin brothers effectively telling us that they bailed out, but we've heard nothing else from anyone else. Will we hear anything? That's probably for another day or another week or another month. But it's just, as I think, as John said right at the beginning, this is typical Newcastle United. Yeah,
a lot of people saying, you know, well, quoting Amanda Staveley, stuff coming out from an interview with Jim White that does blame the Premier League, and that there was also teams in the Premier League that didn't want the deal to go through. Malcolm, good evening. Thanks for joining us, mate.
Hi, good evening, lads.
Malcolm, give us your take on the news that's broken in the last couple of hours.
I'm horrified for the simple reason that I don't think Ashley has any interest in the club whatsoever, and what I fear is that he'll possibly asset strip and then look to sell at a much lesser price. There is, you know, for a start, I can see the better players in the side, the exciting players. I can see them all going this summer. I'm not so sure that we'll see St. Maximin play again in a black and white shirt at St. James. I can see a lot of other players going as well. And what incentive is there for a player to stay? You know, players, they want to know that things are happening, good things are happening, and at the moment it's quite the reverse. And I think players will be very unhappy about the whole situation. And bless him, Steve Bruce, what a closed season he's going to have, because I cannot see him being given a penny to spend, and I can see him being put under instruction to ensure that players are sold.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for your opinion on that, Malcolm. Lots of questions coming in. It'll be impossible to go through them all. So what I'll try and do is try and get a general point across. John, I'll come back to you. We'll keep going round in circles with you guys unless somebody asks a direct question. Henry Maurice has been linked to buying the club. I'll come about BZG to Mitch and Steve in a bit. But Henry Maurice, is there anybody waiting in the wings, John, to pick up the pieces?
We've got to hope and believe that there will be, because without that, it's frightening what this next season is going to produce. Without someone in the wings waiting, we know exactly what we're going to get. It's just what's going to be the outcome. Are we supposed to produce a huge hurrah for staying up narrowly yet again? Or are we going to face with third relegation under Ashley? That is all as of this evening, Newcastle United fans have got to look forward to, and that's the most dreadful thing of the whole lot, is hope, which is something every football fan should be allowed to have. You should be allowed to have hope and allowed to dream, because that's what the game of football is all about. It is that it instills those two things in people's lives, and that's what keeps them going, supporting their club. You cannot have that at the moment. We've got to hope that someone's out there. I am naturally, personally, we've seen it all before, and we're sick to death of seeing it, whether this American guy is for, or whether he's another Tigers who we will find out hasn't got the clout he says he has when it comes to cash. He's been a very sort of vague figure. People don't even know how much he's worth in himself. We don't know at this stage, and we haven't taken him seriously because we had someone already in as the preferred buyer. And while that was going on, there was genuine hope. At this stage, the fact that we've got to go through all this again, and people are saying, well, you know, Mike Ashley for the first time in 13 years wants to sell, so he's devastated. Yeah, he's devastated with £17 million in his pocket, which was the non-refundable deposit that he received from this group. And he isn't as sick as we are. And we've got to pray that either Amanda Staveley, who's come up with what so far, Steve, 3 separate partnerships, possible partnerships, in trying to get Newcastle, can do it again. The first reaction from the Reuben brothers has disappointed me a little bit, because it appears, and we don't know this, as so many days, that they aren't sort of looking to buy it themselves, which was a possibility that was harboured by Newcastle fans. So exactly where we go from here to save us having a summer of absolute doom and gloom, quite frankly, at this moment, I don't know.
Mitch, coming back to you, mate. BZG, a lot of people asking about them. Is there any hope that Newcastle fans have that BZG might look at what's gone on here, see that Mike Ashley's now a willing seller, and perhaps get something sorted and get people together? I'm not trying to give people false hope here, but do you think there's any chance of
I'll give you my thoughts on BZG a couple of weeks ago about where they're at the moment. I genuinely don't know. I am in regular contact with Mid-Hat. We're actually due a coffee at some stage soon. Steve would testify. We've exchanged a few messages recently, but where they're at and what state of play they're at, I just don't know. And again, it would be false hope for me to say I can get Mid-Hat on the blower now. I give him a call now. That's not going to get the club bought, is it? I'd have a nice chat with him. He's a lovely bloke, and I love him to bits, to be fair. But I just don't know where they're at. Rumours that Ashley was trying to wangle more money out of the deal. That sounds exceptionally familiar. Henry Maurice, the whole talking about Henry Maurice, it's a name me and Steve have heard for a long time, but couldn't get much on him. And I still really genuinely cannot get my head around, is he connected to Ashley as a stalking horse? Is he connected to Qatar as a ghost bid, as a shadow bid? Or is there something else? Steve and I have done some digging recently, and we've found a few things out about him and a few connections which are kind of curious. But curious is still not going to push the deal over the line. Curious still isn't going to get NUFC out of the hands of Mike Ashley. You know what? As fans, me, you, and Steve, the three of us, there's not many more have done more in the last 13 years to get the club out of that man's hands. And that's partly why I think I'm so bloody angry and frustrated. Because this time it felt like we were within touch and distance, closer than we've ever been, closer than when we did Yes We Can, closer than when we had the Gagliardis in, closer than when we had Bin Zayed group on the go, and closer again than even if we were able to get Bin Zayed resurrected. I'm quite sure these have gone further down the line than we would have at the stage in January, February we were at. because we still didn't get 100% of Sheikh Khaled to go for it, you know. So I find the whole process at the moment, I'm trying to process it all, and I'm trying not to be bitter, I'm trying not to be angry, I'm trying not to have a go at the rest of the fan base and do what everybody else is doing, which is firing bullets and going, I told you so, and all of that crap that's now circling around at the moment, which I find really, really personally, just stop it. This is exactly what's torn me apart. This is the Stockholm syndrome we've been talking about with Ashley. We've become fractured, and now the fractures are going to blow again if we're not careful. And as a fan base, we've got to keep ahead. We've got to be together again. And I worry about the future of the club, because now this feels like an epoch, a bit like when Malcolm went when Gordon Lee was the manager, where so many people are going to walk away and it'll still be their club, but they'll never come back.
Steve Hastie, Mitch has touched upon it. Social media is something new. It's something that comes back. One son doesn't have it. You, me, and Mitch have it. It's a great place when things are going well. It's a horrible place when things aren't going well. Today, we're obviously going to expect a reaction. We've been 100% positive about the takeover, and rightly so. And rightly so, because, you know, that was the information we were getting. It hasn't come to fruition. You've still got to stand your ground on social media. I block idiots, and that's what I do. We've got a lot of good supporters of the show. Danielle Rath, by the way, said, will these shows continue? Yes, even more so, Danielle. We will continue, and me, Steve, and Neil will continue to do them, as will John and Malcolm. It's been vital, I think, throughout this whole process. But there are journalists out there who have used the takeover to be very negative about it. Yes, they've been proved right. Is it right that somebody in a responsible position like the journalist should then goad Newcastle fans, you know, as they have done in the last couple of hours?
Of course, it's not. It's not right at all, and it's not right that journalists have had the audacity in their columns to actually, you know, put little side issues in regarding certain fans, you know, certain fan groups, playing that sort of game that they have done. You know, I'm all for reading articles. You know, we all watch the media. We all read what's in the local press and the national press. But and I understand when the press guys get stick for some of the things that they've put out, because obviously, you know, there's a lot of lads who've had a lot of stick because they haven't told the line that everybody wanted to hear. But at the same time, when you get those same press guys coming on their own personal Twitter accounts and almost buoying up the fact that, you know, well, certain people in the fan base are going to have egg on their face and stuff like that, you know, as though it's some sort of badge of honor that they're now creating. Going back to the statement, and as I said, that what's written in there, to me, the COVID excuse that is written in that statement doesn't wash. Simply because if you look at the other investments that PIF have made, for example, in Carnival, the cruise ship organisation, there isn't going to be anybody going around on cruise ships for at least the next 18 months, and yet they've invested in something that they're willing to just sit on, you know. And COVID has affected that far more than it has affected Premier League football, and far more than it would affect an investment of only 350 million in a football club, and then probably a couple of $100 million to take it forward until we get out of this situation. Yet they've invested billions of pounds in other businesses that are sitting there floundering, where they're getting no visitors, no use. So I find that sort of angle of hiding behind COVID very strange. Whether that's more on behalf of the Rubens, for example, and their own business acumen within the high street and within building, and obviously they've got a lot of properties and a lot of land in Tyneside, and maybe they're looking at it and thinking, you know what, it's pointless putting up a 17 or 18 or 20 story building on the footpath of St James's Park, or on the footpath across the Tyne Bridge, because business is changing and the whole market is changing for the business that they're in. And so whether they've had some dealings within pulling this, and there's just something not right with this, something not right at all. We've got the deadline, you know, people talk about the deadline of the 1st of August, you know, and whether or not that was the period where the exclusivity was going to run out. I just don't know. But to me, the whole thing stinks.
Malcolm, the Premier League, we know they had a job to do. 17 weeks, it's been too long, Malcolm, hasn't it? It's really dragged on. And I don't think that in itself, over the case of a pandemic and COVID, etc., it has mentally affected supporters. And do you think they could have done it any differently?
Yes, they could have made a decision straight away, and this situation would never have arisen. All I can think is, I just wonder whether the Premier League were aware that there was a clause in that had a deadline, and so they just said to themselves, "Well, look, we don't really want Saudis coming into all of this, so why don't we just sit 17 weeks out, and then it's all over." I really do feel that now that this situation, this current situation has developed, I think that the Premier League should make a statement of some sort, but that they've just stayed silent, and that makes me very suspicious.
Yeah. John, Steve Bruce obviously is in the hot seat. You've already mentioned him at the start of the programme. Do you think there's any chance that Mike Ashley will, under these circumstances that we find ourselves in, maybe revise the budget, but to a more heartier figure than the £35 million that we've been led to believe he's been offered?
I very much doubt it, because his interest is nil. I mean, I never thought that I could be a worse owner than he has been so far. But at the moment, that is a great possibility because he's got no interest in the situation whatsoever. And if you think if the whole kitty is £35 million, that only buys you 9/10 of Joe Linton. So what are we going to do this summer regarding the transfer situation? I mean, you almost think we were looking towards the inevitable of this happening when I see people like Andy Carroll another year on his contract. When we take Manco and he gets 4 years, I know he did well towards the latter end of the season, but 4 years on his contract, Carroll gets an extra year. We're bulling up Gale, who did well in the few games behind closed doors, but still couldn't top the 6 of John Joe. The whole team. I mean, we let in. Steve Bruce had been talking about Newcastle would end up this season better than last season, which was an infinitus, of course. Well, we ended up with less points, goals, let in more goals, had a worse goal difference. We failed on every single account, which tells you how much this team needs rebuilding this season. But do any of if you boys sitting there really believe that we're going to be giving anything near the money required to put this team right? And we can't wait for a new owner because the season will be underway. We'll be on a slope if we're not careful, heading one way, and it's very difficult to turn around while the season is in operation. And this squad needs a huge blood transfusion. There's absolutely no question about that. And £35 million doesn't buy you a centre forward.
Yeah, Steve Hastie, 10,000 supporters walked away last season, leaving Newcastle with an embarrassing set of empty seats in that opening game, of course, against Arsenal. 1,000 more empty seats as well, with a lot of people protesting. Can you see this increasing once supporters are allowed back in full time at St James's Park? Do you think this will see more people walk away? A lot of people commenting on the show tonight that that's the loss. They're not going back.
I do, Steve. If my inbox is anything to go by on WhatsApp, and the number of people who've said, that's it, that's me finished. 40 years, 30 years, 50 years, 20 years, lads, 5 years. People saying, I'm finished with this now. I'm not carrying on. I'm not going while Ashley's carrying on with this club. COVID is a good excuse because, let's face it, you know, there's only going to be a third of the attendance in anyway, regardless. But people are going to go, you know what sort of atmosphere will that be? You know, and what will I be watching on the pitch? Not necessarily just what am I going to experience in the stand, but on the pitch. Anyone who watched Brentford the other night, we would get turned over, no problem, against Brentford with a pick and play at the moment. You know, and would have probably got turned over against Swansea as well if we'd had to play them. You know, look where we are, where we're heading, and every year that Ashley's ran this football club until Rafa came. Yes, we had there was a bit of a hiatus when under Pardew, but every year at the start of every season, you know what? Everybody else moves forward, and we stay static, which in fact means we go back. And I think yet again we will go back. We will take another step back, and then we'll be clinging on by the fingernails. That's if we've got any left, you know, or if we can be bothered to even chew them, you know.
Yeah, guys, when you're watching the show, please give it a like, just click the thumb up and give it a share so people can watch the program. If you want a little bit of relief from this bad news about the day, I am going to do an extra show after this. I'm interviewing former Newcastle centre-half Peter Jackson at 7:15 on the channel, so if anybody wants to hang around and ask Peter a few questions about the glory days of the 1980s, then give us, to watch later on. Mitch, where does this put us with players, do you think? Malcolm mentioned it earlier. Alan St. Maximin, of course, is probably our biggest asset at the moment. Do you think Mike is forced to sell him in the summer?
Well, Nathan Ake has just been sold for what, 41 million?
Yeah.
41 million for Nathan Ake. He's a centre-back who's just been relegated. This is the reality, and they're talking about the 35 million transfer budget. Dear me, what we're going to buy with that? We could buy Sunderland with it, but that's about it. That wouldn't keep up. We'll buy the entire bloody squad of Sunderland with that, and that wouldn't keep up. Is he going to sell? If we're going to want a chance to stay up, you want to sell ASM for, well, if Ake is worth 40 million, is ASM worth 100? Current market, but would that be reinvested in the squad? History would tell us not. History would tell us that he would pocket a lot of that and would be still shopping in Poundland. I mean, dear me, this is the reality now. And for the club to turn around and said, well, this was a bit of a surprise. Well, that's because you, Mr. Ashley, washed your hands of this whole process months ago. Wouldn't talk to anybody, wouldn't discuss anything with anybody, wouldn't keep anybody informed, wouldn't even release a joint statement to say where things were at. And you brought this on yourself.
Only Mike Ashley could make money from something as ridiculous as this. It's 1 million for each week that it's gone on, Malcolm. What's your views on how things are going to pan out over the next few weeks, Malcolm? Do you think we'll see another bid come in? Do you think players will leave? Try and give us your assessment on how you see things panning out over the next few weeks.
Well, something like this is hugely, hugely upsetting in the dressing room. I can assure you that players will be wondering just what their future is and where it lies. Is there a future to be had at St James Park now? And it's obviously affecting supporters. I'm just listening to you guys speaking from your hearts, and I'm looking at all of the texts that are coming in, and people are really down over this. And I don't quite know how on earth this is going to settle itself down. I really don't, unless there is another possible takeover. Because I really think that Mike Ashley had pretty much washed his hands of the place. Ashley had pretty much washed his hands. And for him to step back into the club, I don't think he wants that at all.
Yeah, Paul Oxley's asking if we expect a statement from the club. I think we've had one, haven't we, John? It came as a surprise to them.
Well, yes, they're bound to say that, aren't they? But you're not going to get yourself sucked into the middle of all this. It'll have come as a huge disappointment to Ashley personally. I mean, the club itself, what does it mean? Ashley's back in running it. Seanley's got a long-term future when he was about to leave shortly afterwards. Steve Bruce is inevitably with us for the rest of his contract as things stand. We go back to the same thing. Do we then now rely on Joe Linton and Carroll and whatever, and the same people playing at the back? We lose Matt Longstaff. Do we lose others? And it's a great question. Newcastle cannot afford to be a selling club that they have been so regularly over such a long period of time, going right back to Gascoigne all the way through to now, where we're sending Wijnaldum, Liverpool, etc., etc. We cannot, if we talked about it being a huge fight next season to see off relegation threat. If we say Maximum and Dubrovka, then there isn't a fight to stay up. We go down because what comes in will be nothing of that. We've got about three players, maximum 4, that are anywhere near steady, reliable Premier League week in, week out reliability. We've got to build on that and build massively on that. And you don't do that in the free transfer market, in the loan market, because look at the 3 players that ended the season on loan. Do any of you want them to be Newcastle United signings full time for next season? I mean, Lazaro wasn't even played by the guy that brought him in. And for my reckoning, Bentaleb and Rose were nowhere near what we've got already, never mind bettering them, and that doesn't take much doing.
Yeah, I would agree, John, and just following on from what you were saying there, I have to say that that players get disillusioned when things like that happen in the club, and I cannot see how anybody of any real ability would want to come to Newcastle, not for anything. And it's not as if they go overboard on contracts at Newcastle, but quality players, I don't think, would want to touch Newcastle at all. And so it's going to make it a, and Steve Bruce is already talking about loan players. Loan players? Good heavens above. I just find the whole thing, it's got a touch of madness to it. The whole situation that we have right now, and that's why I can't see anybody wanting to come to Newcastle.
Yeah, a lot of people are.
Can I just say, that I remember when I came to Newcastle, they had won just some 15 months before. They had won the Fairs Cup. These were European winners that I was joining. That they had that recent history when I joined.
Yeah.
As a young player, you want to see scope and that you can go places with this club. Well, where's anybody going to go with Newcastle United right now?
I think the other thing to say on that, Malcolm, is that when you signed, I think it was only 15 months before that they'd actually gone out and spent almost every penny that they made in the Fairs Cup run on Jimmy Smith, £100,000, which was an awful lot of money at the time. But then you came along 15, 16, 17 months later at 180,000. And everybody was like, "Wow, this is a go-ahead club. This was the club moving forward. It was building something. It was looking at it." Joe had looked and said, "I now need a centre forward. The days of Wynne have moved on. I now need to move this. I moved Robson on," and that's what he did. But he was looking ahead. But they were investing the money that they had. Newcastle United would, and the only money that Newcastle United will invest will be the money that they've already allocated, the 35 million, which, if you add up, looks at the 20 million for Lazaro, the 5 million for Rose and the 10 million for Bentaleb, and you're thinking, is that 35 million? My God! And we've already heard Lazaro turn around and go, you know what? I don't think I will be here because I've only started 2 games and I came for game time. And I think, if anything, Lazaro will stay simply because his own club don't want him and have other people and already lined up other people in his position and are overloaded. So they might strike some sort of, a year longer loan deal in the hope that the lad comes good. And that's where we're heading. That's where we're heading now. And they'll hide behind COVID and they'll hide behind the ground, but it's no good.
Yeah, go on, John. Were you going to make
and this is a club that once upon a time spent a world record 15 million quid to buy a centre forward in those days have absolutely left us a million miles away from it. And the hope that Newcastle fans had is that those type of days might just be about to return. I don't think fans were expecting immediate trophies, and not immediately. What they wanted immediately was to be allowed to dream and to have some hope, because that has been driven out of town during the last 13 years. We have got neither of those tonight. We haven't got any dreams or any hopes, and we've certainly got silverware. It's all on the horizon. And of the country, what annoys me and irritates this, and we're far too ambitious. For 69, the ambition or loyal, that's a different word to ambition. We would love to have ambition, but we know that it doesn't exist in St. James's Park at the moment. I don't think it's asking too much to be allowed to dream again.
No, definitely not. Mark Taylor says, well said, John. We just want the team showing some, which is true. Steve, a lot of people asking, and Mitch, a lot of people asking, I'll come to you, Mitch, actually. You haven't had much chance to talk in the last 10 minutes. A lot of people saying, what can we do as a fan base? A lot of people, quite rightly, after 17 weeks of being locked down and having to deal with this ongoing takeover, are saying, what can we do? Is there anything we can do? In the Premier League, protesting next season, what can we do to try and get this through? I'm shrugging my shoulders, mate. After years of various protests, etc., I really don't know. I think we're stuck with Ashley until somebody comes in that the Premier League by the club.
Never been one to tell fans what to do. I learned when we were setting the supporters club and the trust up that if you tell Newcastle United fans what to do, you'll get 2 answers. One of them ends with off, and the other one is why. Why are you telling me what to do? Who are you to tell me what to do? I've got to say to people now, if you've had a thought that now is your time to walk away, now is your nadir, now is your line in the sand, perhaps now is your line in the sand. Because Ashley, if he's genuinely tried to use this expiry clause to get more money out of a deal, bearing in mind we were told, and Steve will back us up on this, but we were told right at the start, why is this deal being negotiated now during COVID? Have they got any idea what the post-COVID football world's going to look like? We've talked about this at length over the last few weeks. I'm watching people say Leeds are going to be ahead of it. Telling you now, it's not that long ago, Leeds' owner was trying to sell to Qatar, actually, and he was dropping the price daily because he was desperate to get rid of it before COVID. They're trying to get out of contracts that they've got with players to sign them up and bring them on. Are Leeds going to be ahead of it? Nobody knows, because nobody really knows what the effect of COVID now and what COVID next season is going to have on a club. Because 30% capacity, 50% capacity, I've been told in football leagues, some of the teams are going to get 5% capacity or 8% capacity. That's ridiculous. This is going to kill clubs. The post-COVID football world is going to end up totally different. This was Ashley's one chance to get a deal that got him a maximum out. Now, he's never going to get this deal again. The other people who are lining up now, if it's Maurice in whatever guise it is or isn't, if it's GCAP still, because I know the people are talking about another long-standing American interest. Well, the long-standing American interest was GCAP, except they their big backers, Redbird Capital, have just gone out and bought a second division French club in the last few weeks. So if it's them, okay, where's your money coming from, mate? And what kind of bid are you going to put on the table? Because I'm telling you now, Newcastle United is not worth 300 million right now. Right now, it's not. Not in the shape it's in, not with the future it's got, not with the squad we've got. So there's no way that club's worth 300 million. It was a nonsense deal. It was a nonsense amount. And we were being told this by people within the game ages ago. And we went along with it and we ran with it because we were told confident, keep the fans confident. That's exactly what we've done. And we've done everything that was asked of us. We played our part. It's just a shame nobody else could, for whatever reason.
We need to add to that the fact that we also had at the same time the people who are chipping away in the background telling us that Henry Morris has offered 50 million more.
Why would you offer 50 million more for a club that's already been agreed at 300?
Yeah.
That's like, it's ridiculous.
That's
it makes no
crazy,
sense. It doesn't make any sense at all, does it, Malcolm?
And yet we had people in the media who ran that narrative all the way through in the background for the last 6 weeks, telling us that there's another guy who's going to offer them more, as though that was going to be the catalyst for Ashley to turn around and wipe this one deal out to go for something else after he's already agreed a 300 million deal that he agreed in April that's been held up and held up and held up by the Premier League. It's just mental.
If our club right now is worth 200 million, I'd be amazed.
Yeah. John, the whole thing with Henry Morris is obviously something the fans are all talking about. A lot of the comments simply say that they feel that this is an Ashley stooge. It was somebody created or brought in to try and kick the Premier League up the backside to get the deal done, because Ashley wants to sell the club. He wanted the deal done quickly, and he was trying his best to help the thing on. Is there any way that is there any way you can show some light on the Morris thing? Do you think it's a genuine bid?
I'm very suspicious of it, to be brutally truthful. I'm praying it is, because I'm praying any bid is genuine at the moment. But alternative doesn't bear a thing about. They always say, be careful what you wish for. Well, we wish for and whoever came in would not be worse on themselves in a more skinflint way than Mike Ashley has done for 13 years here. I'm very suspicious of it because, as the guys were just saying, you're coming in and you're bidding more for a club than it's already been agreed. I mean, now you could say with the Saudis out of the equation, you can bid 200 million, as we were saying, and say, right, okay, well, that's my deal, take it or leave it. I'm very suspicious of it, but because we've had deal after deal, haven't we? Before this one, which gave us real hope because the deposit went down and it went right to the last hurdle and fell at the last hurdle. But the other deals, until we get to a situation where the Premier League let the white smoke come out the chimney down there and say the deal's done, Newcastle fans, especially after what's happened today, Newcastle fans will remain cynical about all the deals that are possible, because there was a great belief originally that Ashley didn't want to sell, and that I think was absolutely true. Not true now, but unfortunately it's come back and bit him on the leg with what's gone on with the Premier League. The longer I was confident virtually all the way through that this would eventually get there, despite the two major things, which was TV, piracy, human rights. I had a great belief for 3/4 of this wait that it would happen. And then the longer and the longer and the longer it went, the longer the Premier League let it lie, the longer that allowed other people to get on their hind legs and have a dip at the whole thing and try to bring it down, you get worried. Because all we were told was that there's no red flags, everything will be all right, etc., etc. all this, from my point of view, was coming from one source, which is the buying source. We never got the Premier League tipping anyone off and saying this is about to happen anytime soon. We never had the club or Ashley doing that, because quite frankly, the club didn't know where they were about, and Steve Bruce didn't know where they were about. The more this went on, the more worried and concerned I was. And so were the people in football. We read about what Alan Shearer was saying, that there were real doubts, because it doesn't take this long to decide. They might have been trying to hit the Saudis over the head with the TV piracy and what the Premier League wanted. The more I went into this, the more I was apprehensive that this day would come. Still shocked, still hurt, still angry and very upset when it has happened. No question about that, because I might earn my living through writing about football, but basically I'm just a fan from cradle to grave, like everybody else. And what I wanted for this club was it to be a new ownership. Forget whether that's for or any other reason, not for my reason, for being a Geordie, for being a fan all my life. Him as the other, many more than 52,000 to go there. There's many more Geordie fans than that. We all wanted the same thing, desperately wanted the same thing, and we feel we've been robbed of it for whatever reason. We've been robbed of it tonight.
Yeah, I agree 100%. A lot of stuff coming in from various interviews from Amanda Staveley on different networks, newspapers, television, radio, all reporting different things. The interesting ones to come through are that a couple of members' clubs objected to Liverpool and one of the teams that are being named as two teams that objected. A lot of comments as well. Direct quote from Amanda Staveley saying that the piracy wasn't an issue and that was sorted very, very quickly, Malcolm. So Malcolm first, then you, Mitch. Malcolm, what's your views on hearing the two members' clubs would object? Is that surprising?
I'm quite staggered, I have to say. You know, it is not for one club to get involved in the business of another. It really isn't. You know, do your battle on the field of play, but if they were interfering, then I really think they should now come out publicly and say what reasons they were interfering for.
Yeah. David Coverdale from The Sun breaks the story that Saudis have said Ashley tried to significantly renegotiate the £300 million deal at the last minute. I mean, I find that story, Mitch, hard to believe. We know there was we find that exclusivity deal, though, you know, was signed. I mean, I know I don't really know whether there's scope in that, though. You know, if they've signed a deal and it's down to the Premier League, can they alter the deal? I don't know.
If as reported there was a date by which that deal expired, then fine well Mike Ashley would, because he did and he has and he's done it before. Steve and I have got about 4 examples of that, so that wouldn't surprise me. With regards to objections, I think I told you on one of our shows months ago, there were 6 clubs objected. It wasn't just Spurs and Liverpool. They may have been the big ones, but there was 4 others, including Everton, Wolves, and 2 other clubs as well. The objection...
I would love to know what their reasons are, Mitch. I really would.
We've seen this throughout COVID, Malcolm. The votes on League 1 and League 2 showed you everything that you need to know about football clubs at the moment. When push comes to shove, they will never see the greater good of the game. They will always revert to self-interest. Always. And it will destroy the game. And in post-COVID, it might destroy the game. League 1 and League 2, when they're restructured and all made to go part-time, and all made to join in with teams from the Vanarama League and the regional leagues below the championship, they've only got themselves to blame, because they could have worked this one out, but they didn't. They went to self-servitude, they went to self-interest, and that's what all football clubs will ultimately do. Clubs like West Ham would look at us and go, "Oh my God, we'll never catch up to them if they get all that money." bearing in mind they're hemorrhaging money. They were valued, they reckon they were valued not that long ago at 800 million. You'll not get 450 million for them right now, if you're lucky. And that's bearing in mind that grounds on prime London real estate.
That they don't own.
So, that they don't own. Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. So, you know, what this actually shows is a flaw in the game. And the flaw in the game is clubs will revert to self-interest when you put them to a vote on something huge, like this club's going to be taken over by this entity and they're going to pump loads of money in and it's going to be great for the game. And then the clubs turn around and go, yeah, maybe great for the game, but it's not great for us. So we want to object to this on fatuous grounds. I mean, DME, I've been led to believe West Ham were one of the clubs that objected, bearing in mind what their owners' background in history. What are they objecting about? DME.
If I remember rightly as well, Mitch, we actually wrote a paper that we put forward to someone who was heavily involved with the club in the past, and has lots of connections in the Premier League. And we were asking questions because of COVID. We were asking questions about how the league were going to cope when we announced that COVID was when there was going to be a lockdown. And we looked particularly at League One and League Two and the National League. And one of the things we suggested, we said, could we see a situation whereby there would be no relegation, no promotion, that 1 and 2 would possibly be suggested that they went part-time to basically save the league, and that there would be no promotion, but to give those clubs in 1 and 2 the opportunity to especially after Bury, to create a little bit of solidity among themselves without the risk, and at the same time giving the clubs in the National League the opportunity to basically solidify themselves and make themselves stronger, knowing that they weren't going to have to be promoted and spend money, and that was the key. And I think the word that we got back was, all sounds great in theory, lads, but in practice, they will stab each other in the back rather than agree to something like that. They will agree it to your face, and then when it comes to the vote, they will all, with their self-interest, go, no, because it's not suitable for me.
Yep.
Never mind what the league is concerned. It's not something because they have this egotistical idea in their head that it'll not happen to them. And so they couldn't care less about Bury, and they couldn't care less about clubs in the Vanarama, or clubs that are hovering like Stevenage who are relegated or whatever. They weren't interested because they have this mentality that they're going to reach that holy grail of promotion into the Championship, and then do a Brentford and get into a playoff and raise money and maybe have or be a Bournemouth. So you're dead right in that respect. Absolutely dead right, because that's the greed of football. And now what we've just seen is that greed of football at the top, at the very top in the Premiership, with clubs with history that just tells you that they have hovered around relegation. They're scared stiff of somebody coming in. Breaking that top 6 mold is the fear of the current top 6. And that thought that there's one less team at the bottom, which means that there's one more chance of being relegated if you're a West Ham or a Crystal Palace.
Yeah. John, this hasn't helped, has it, that it's all been played out in public? And I know it's because Newcastle fans are like detectives. As soon as there's a change at company's house, Newcastle fans are on it. As soon as there's a flight in the sky, Newcastle fans looking for Mike Ashley's helicopter to know where he's going. And suddenly the rumour starts on social media. And I know you're not on social media, but that's how a lot of this starts. But this has been a huge takeover that's been played out in public, and it hasn't helped, has it? It hasn't helped the fans.
I don't think it has helped the fans whatsoever. But it's inevitable way of the world, as you said, Steve. Now, this is the way it's going to be. And when you've got the passion that Newcastle United fans have for the club, they are anxious for the slightest morsel to grab hold of and give them hope or dash them out. I mean, the greatest things we've heard is time for the cans out, or it's time to slit your throat. And that's happened 3 times a day for the last 3 months. And it will start again when this next takeover, because pray God there's going to be a takeover at some time. We know that Ashley's not going to be in charge of Newcastle United for the next 13 years, God, but we don't know that going to change. We need, because everybody that's owned Newcastle, from the good, the bad, and the ugly, are just looking after the keys for a certain length of time onto somebody else. The only people that are there constantly are the fans, from cradle to grave, the people that actually care about the club. And we know that it's going to continue like that. But we're going to get speculation. It's the name of the game. And of course, the speculation is heightened when several people, i.e. the Premier League, i.e. because of the confidentiality clause, both the club and the prospective can't talk on the record. That just heightens the speculation of one sentence that ever goes out there. But I mean, the one thing we can all agree on is that the wait that we had with the Premier League was not only disgraceful, it was debilitating. Yes. It was destroyed Geordies up here. There's no question. It actually ripped our hearts out, waiting. And there's no excuse for that. The Premier League ought to have acted with more authority than that situation. They could have put out a general statement without being specific about the in and outs of what the deal in front of them was, but they didn't. You know, and what the boys were saying in self-sufficiency and looking after number one is absolutely 600% correct. What happens in football is the people that keep football alive, i.e. the supporters, are bottom of the list of priority on anybody that's within football. To hell with the fans, they're just the customers. Well, if you've got no customers, you've got no shop, mate. And the sooner people realise that, the better. It is the fans are the last consideration given in this at any stage whatsoever. And yet they are expected, once this COVID business is all over, to fill the ground with 52,000 again. The way things are going, that ain't going to happen.
I've seen an interesting question there. Could it be that, Mitch, could it be that the IF, PCP and the Rubens try to renegotiate? Somebody just given a devil's advocate argument there. Due to the fact, if you read the statement, obviously they're talking about COVID and the effects on football, etc. Is that possible after the terms of exclusivity? They've come back and said, well, actually, it's not worth that much. And
that might be their subtle hint that Mr. Ashley wanted more money and they're not prepared to pay more money.
Right, okay. Yeah.
That would be another way to interpret a statement like that. Bearing in mind, I've got to say the buyers, and I've been a bit frustrated about this over the last couple of weeks as well, you know, that they've played such a straight bat. Everybody else has been breaking NDAs and leaking stuff to the press and going here and going there and tittle-tattling. And they've said out. They kept mum and they kept stum, and they left us to fight their battles for them. And yet, everybody else is doing it. And that, to me, the other way you look at it could be, actually he's come back and asked for more money and we don't think it's worth any more money.
Yeah.
So it's not happening. If there was a point at which that agreement passed and that was legal and right, well, that's the law. That is how it works. That's how these things work. These agreements are set in stone, and lawyers spend a lot of time and a lot of money. And like Maydad said, he spent a lot of money, and I'm quite sure PIF spent the money. And let's be fair. I bet Mike Ashley spent a lot of money, and I bet he's pretty hacked off right now as well.
Yeah.
Steve and I know what BZG's legal bill was.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you now, I couldn't pay that legal bill, and I wouldn't pay that legal bill.
I couldn't pay it for the next 20 years.
Exactly, yeah. You know, I couldn't get a mortgage to pay it.
Yeah, I think one thing I would say is that people have, there's a lot being said about this so-called non-returnable deposit, and I think I always considered that non-returnable deposit to avoid tire kickers, and that was the reason that
well, look, that's why we
all the way through.
We got asked to buy a box, didn't we?
That's right. Buy a box for now. And at the time, it was 250 grand that was quoted, and then when we checked, the box was 24. But that's a different story. But it was to avoid the tire kickers. And the one thing you can't accuse PCP and PIF and the Rubin brothers of being with tire kickers. You know, they put their money where their mouth was. They actually made the offer, and they actually agreed the offer that Ashley put up and wanted, and the both sides agreed. So in terms of then costing them after all of this an amount of 17 million for losing a non-returnable deposit, to me seems rather strange. And I don't know whether the questions will eventually be asked of, well, have you ended up losing your 17 million plus more and your legal fees and all of the time and effort, etc.?
The answer to that, Steve, is yes, because they've pulled out. They have lost £17 million. Now, whether that was £17 million the PCP put in, whether it was 6 million each, for argument's sake, between PCP and the Rubins, whatever it was, they've lost that money because the deal was with Mike Ashley. They've pulled out of the deal and they've lost it. And that 17 million essentially was to allow them to be exclusivity, but also for them to for Mike Ashley to make sure, as you say, they didn't have tire kickers.
Yeah,
definitely 100%. So that money's gone down the pan. I'm seeing a lot of people asking the question, is this the end for PCP? Amanda Staveley's allegedly come out and said that from her perspective, she'd still love to buy the club. I don't, and I'm seeing a mixed reaction. A lot of people saying if they see Amanda Staveley's name with a takeover, they'll completely disbelieve it. A lot of people go on, Mitch. You've got a point to say about that.
If she does it again, she's got to make sure it doesn't get played out in public. So that's 2 times now, and 2 times you, I, Steve have been dancing the dance. And it's got to be done a different way, whether it's shielded, whether it's done through a different way of doing it. And I can put them in touch. Steve, I can put them in touch with the man who will do it for them.
What with Company's House though, because things get leaked at Company's House.
Company's House is easy to work. It's a different way of doing it, and I'll put them in touch with the man who will do it for them.
Good stuff. Well, if there's a man who can get the takeover through, it's definitely you, Mitch. I think you need to be. I think you need to be doing that instead of pulling people's teeth out. I mean, we all feel like we've had our teeth pulled out tonight. Malcolm, look, we've got to concentrate. We've got to put this in the history books, as far as I'm concerned. We'll wake up tomorrow morning. We're moving forward. We've got to start concentrating on next season now. The players are away on holiday, but they'll be sharp in for pre-season training. What will Steve Bruce be thinking, and what will Steve Bruce be saying? Will he be happy, do you think, in one sense, that at least he knows now what his budget is and what his plan is moving forward for the foreseeable future?
I think he'll be happy in certain ways. This keeps him in a job, I would say. But at the same time, I think he knows now he is going to have a very, very difficult job in hand. Very difficult indeed. Can you imagine Steve Bruce phoning Mike Hastie up and saying, "Okay, well, you still own the club, so I'd like some money in the transfer market. I want to buy 2 or 3 really good quality players." What's Mike Hastie going to say? On your bike, Steve, on your bike. Get a loan player here and there. And he's already been talking loan players. And that's what Newcastle United has been reduced to.
Yeah, that's where we're at, unfortunately. John, before we finish off, then Steve Bruce, just finish off with that. What's his plans going to be, do you think, now? Is he going to have to Matt out? Is he going to be ringing Mike Ashley back and saying, well, now we know what's going on, I need a few extra quid? What's the future hold for Newcastle's football team short term?
Short term, it's nothing but bleak. I've always been a full person, but as of tonight, it feels half empty. Being a typical Geordie, we'll get our heads up again because we always do. From the point of view of Steve Bruce, will he get more out of Ashley? He would. I mean, Rafa Benitez can get the money out of Ashley with his sort of CV, and I don't think Steve is going to do any better than Benitez by any means. And seems willing to play with any hand dealt him, because I go back to giving contracts to. I mean, I don't know how we signed Andy Carroll to start with. Never mind then keep him for another year. I don't know what Manquillo did to get the 4-year contract. I don't know what we're doing at this stage, considering the 3 guys that have just been on loan. I don't know why at this stage we're going to sign people for next season on loan. We're in an absolute mess with a squad from top that's nowhere near good enough. Yes, it's a miracle that we stayed up. And I was asked by you, Steve, a little while back when Steve Bruce had been on his run where he got 42 points in 32 games or whatever, whether we should be apologising to him for criticising him. And I said, to be for staying up, but we certainly don't owe apology. If you look at the run-in we've had and where we end up, because it's always the end of the season that gives you the real message. The real message was we survived by the skin of our teeth last season, and do you think under exactly the same circumstances and the same owner we'll stay up this season? I don't think you'd get me to say that's a certainty. And like it or not, that is a situation tonight, which is why, like it or not, we've got to pray there's somebody out there with some cash, and it maybe as much get it cheaper than it has been, but come in and do something for Newcastle, because my God, if we've ever needed to be rescued, we've never needed it more than we need it right now.
Yeah, I think we add to that, John, the state of the academy, the state of the training ground, the state of the infrastructure at St James's Park. The fact that you walk around it now and it's been left almost to dereliction over the last 4 or 5 months since COVID started. The grass and the moss that's grown around that stadium. I mean, Steve, you walked around it, 4 months ago, beginning of March, when the lockdown first started. I tell you what, if you walked around it now and saw the state of it in comparison to what it was like then, people would be absolutely gobsmacked at what they would look at and what they'd see, because it's a shambles. But training ground, academy, all of the ambition, all the plans that we were hoping to come to fruition, the things that Ashley hasn't spent the money on is not going to be spent, and then we're going to be further down the line, and we're going to be further into the situation where young lads aren't going to, and their families aren't going to want them to sign for Newcastle United, because they're going to go down the road and they're going to look at training facilities at other clubs, and they're going to look at the academies at other clubs and what they're putting together. That is just as important as what's going to happen on the pitch in terms of the club going forward, because that was another aspect that the likes of PCP and PIF were hopefully going to resolve for us. And I think we all were of the opinion that desperately needed doing anyway. So let's see what Ashley does now.
Yeah, Mitch, we'll leave the last word to you, mate, before we finish. Don't forget, guys, I am interviewing Peter Jackson at 7:15. So if you want to hang around for a little bit of yesteryear, then please do. Mitch, last word to you about today and how we move forward as a football club after the devastating news today.
It's very difficult to know how we're going to move forward, mate. Under the current owner, we're treading water at best, and that's the reality. And people talking about getting new deals up and running. One of the guys that Steve and I have been dealing with for a number of years messaged me today and said the next possible opportunity for a deal to be done is Christmas. So this is the reality for the rest of this year, and we've got to live with it. Now, how we live with it as a fan base, I think I'm still processing. How we deal with it is people who've tried to keep the fan base together and trying to get their spirits up. I'm still processing. I know I'm very angry. I know I'm very hurt. I think we all are. And I hope we can find a way to use that energy. And until that time, and until we've processed it all, I would ask everybody just to back off and take some time to think about it. Don't react in anger, because I've been bloody angry and I'm angry today, and I've really wanted to react in anger. Hence why I've gone through half a pack of cigars tonight, talking to you guys. And the only thing we'll ever get done as a fan base is if we're united. And Ashley's done this very, very well. He's splintered with, he's fractured with, he's almost broke with. Don't let him hit that final hammer in now.
Yeah. And a big thanks to you, Steve, as well, because you've kept our spirits up while we've been trying to keep everybody else's spirits up. You've done exactly the same for us. So thanks for that.
Look, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. But the shows are going to continue. Everybody's saying that everybody's asking the questions. Look, even more so now. And tomorrow night, obviously, I will be back on with Steve and Mitch again, and we'll have a few guests. UFC 360 joining us tomorrow. Also got Mark Carey joining us from another one of the Twitter sites as well, and Facebook sites. We're going to have plenty of people on, and of course, Stab Mondo will be on giving the female perspective as well. So, and it's her birthday tomorrow, so everyone's got to be happy tomorrow. But yeah, we'll be back tomorrow 6 o'clock until 8, and then I will be back next week with Malcolm and John. We won't be talking about the takeover. We'll be looking back at last season and going through what we should have gone through tonight. But thanks for joining us, John. Thanks for joining us, Malcolm, Mitch, and Steve. I'll catch you tomorrow. But thanks, guys, and thanks everybody for watching. Give it a like and a share. Good night, guys.
Thank you,
Cheers,
Steve.
guys.
Good night, guys.